Good morning, or good afternoon, and welcome to the Public Health and Safety meeting. It is 2 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Next on the agenda is, well, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Councilwoman Ortiz. I'm the chair.
Councilwoman Hiller, District 1.
Councilman Padilla, District 5.
Thank you. Also, we'll approval of the November 18 minutes.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Great. Number 3 is property maintenance discussion, and we're going to talk about weeds, illegal weeds. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Haugen.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the presentation pulled up.
Okay. It's kind of funny we're starting with weeds in the dead of winter.
Ronaldo might be coming to my rescue.
Oh, Ronaldo's great. You want to talk about weeds, Ronaldo?
Oh, yeah. So if you can find it, that'd be great. No, I thought if I gave it to you, that's all I needed to do. That's not, okay. No, that's,
Okay. You didn't have it on something.
no. I have it in a couple minutes, but I don't.
Yeah, we would have to do that.
Okay, so we can either, well, I emailed it to you, yes.
No, you're fine. We got a little bit of room here. Sorry, audience, we're having a little technical difficulties here.
The video. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, what? That goes last.
All righty.
All right, well, thank you for having me. And today, obviously, we're talking about weeds. And when we talk about weeds, we're talking about weeds and grass and annual vegetation that's over 12 inches. Does not include trees and shrubs or cultivated flowers. We include alleys, easements, right-of-ways, and fence lines. That's something that we didn't say when we sent the letters 2015, 2016. So people kind of figured out mow the front lawn and we can get away with this. And so the letters are sent saying this includes the front yard, the backyard, the alleys, the easements, anything that you're responsible for. And that's what we check on. A lot of times people mow the front yard and think it's good enough, which it isn't. And when we first started holding them to their entire property, there was a lot of pushback. And I thought it was only fair there was pushback because for years they'd been playing that they, we mow the front, we get away with it. So we worked with them and the community understands that it's their entire property. They receive 1 written notice per year. We send it out first class mail. We only send 1 written notice per year because if we don't, then the violators that intentionally violate won't mow until they receive a letter. So each time they would just wait until a letter shows up and then they would mow and there'd be no harm, no foul. So it's 1 letter and that's what state law and the city ordinance allows us to do it. we enforce our grass and weeds through both reactionary and proactive enforcement. Reactionary through our see-click fix, email complaints, phone-in complaints, and people just flagging us down. And on proactive enforcement, where the inspectors actually go out and they look for weeds while they're looking for the other issues that go on within their territories. When violations are found, we notify the property owners through the legal written process. State law allows a city to adopt their own code when it comes to notification for weeds. So the city, in their wisdom, did, and that's why we send first-class mail. Forgive me, the little PowerPoint thing's not clicking or changing like it's supposed to. Got it. Okay. So state law allows the city to adopt their own code when it comes to the notification of weeds. That allows us also to limit it to first class. First class works out better for us too, because a lot of people don't pick up their certified mail, and certified mail seems to take a longer time than first class mail. We allow 10 days for the person to correct the violation when we send it first class. We don't have to give them that much time, but we found that was a reasonable amount of time to give, considering that the mail now goes up to Kansas City to get sorted and then comes back to Topeka. When you look at that, sometimes that's 3, maybe 4 days before somebody gets their mail. So we're actually giving them 5, 6, 7 days to take care of the issue. Already talked about only one letter. In 2019, we had 3,296 weed cases. That was down about 700 from 2018, but it had to do with how strange the weather was, and we just can't control how the weather goes, and it really put us back. The entire year, our abatement crew was behind up to 200 cases all month long, and it was just how the rain came in. It would roll in, it would shut them down. They can't mow when it's muddy and it's rainy, and these cases would pile up. In other years, we can stay right on top of it. You just can't predict that. Out of those 3,296 weed cases, we had 5,727 inspections and follow-up inspections by the inspectors, and 791 weed abatements. That's just what they did for us, the inmate crews, because I think they did like 1,500 cases where they mowed properties that both the city owned and what we cited for. 228 received penalty fees, but were not mowed. And what that means is if you receive a second notice of violation, well, you don't receive the second notice. So we send you the notice, we go out, we take care of it, or you take care of it, and then you allow your grass to go 12 inches again. We then just automatically send a mow crew out there. If the mow crew goes out there and finds that you mowed it, it's $106.65 for us to do the whole action that we took. So that's where 228 people were cited and then allowed their grass to go into a violation a second time, but mowed it before we could mow it. A total of 6,538 visits went to properties just for weeds alone, and we billed out $263,423 in fees. The administrative penalty for the mowing is $100, and it increases to $200 on second and subsequent violations in a 12-month period. There's a $140 administrative fee every time we mow, and then the county contract fee is $50 an hour, and it averages out for like residential lots of we bill it a half hour. So the average lot is a $25 bill, because that's about all. It takes them less than a half hour, but they bill it for a half hour. But we also go into open fields, which can run into several $100s when we mow the property, because we bill hourly. Postage for the billing is $6.65, so that is tacked on to it as well. A first-time offense on a residential lot will cost a property owner $271.65. The basic process for the case: we receive the complaint, we go out and we inspect it, and we document it, how we inspect it. I mean, it's visual, it's from public view, but we take a 12-inch, it's a big 12-inch stick with a 12 inches marked on it with Sharpie, and we plant it in the grass, and we take a picture of the grass showing that the grass is taller than the 12 inches, and we document it through pictures. We send a first-class letter to the owner. We give them 10 days to comply. It says 13 on the PowerPoint there, but your handout and printout says 10 days. Posting may be required, which restarts the case. Those are on rare ones where we find out that we got the first-class letter back and it said undeliverable. So then we'll go post a property to let them know that they're in violation. Reinspection for compliance and non-compliance, and when they go out there, they see it's in compliance, we close the case. On your first case, if you mow the lot after we notify you, it doesn't cost a dime. So there's no harm, no foul. On the second and subsequent cases, if you mow, it's $106.65. Sometimes a warrant is required. Warrants are required if somebody posts a no trespassing sign, puts a lock on their fence that we have to either cut or figure out. And we've actually had people build fences with no gates. And they've done that after we went in and mowed. So they're just trying to stop us, but we'll get a warrant and then we'll take down the gate and we'll mow. There's a hearing possible for anybody who receives this violation if they believe we've interpreted the code incorrectly. And if they do that, then that weed case is put on hold for the hearing. So it can really add up. So if we give them 10 days, they ask for a hearing, the hearing isn't for 2 weeks, then the hearing officer gives them another 10 days. You're talking about a whole month that thing grew. We then abate the property by mowing it, and we bill the property owner. That's the entire process of a weed case. The code, what the code says is all premises and exterior property shall be maintained free of weeds and plant growth in excess of 12 inches in height. All noxious weeds shall be prohibited. Weeds shall be defined as all grasses, annual plants, vegetation, other than trees, shrubs, provided, however, that this term shall not include cultivated flowers and gardens. The word in there, provided, kind of has created misunderstandings, and it's confusing because you don't know where to put it because of how the punctuation is. The property maintenance unit has interpreted that word provided means that I'll have to go back, that the trees and shrubs that you plant, the garden that you plant, is what we're talking about. But we don't consider volunteer trees or shrubs, we don't know what they are. We don't know that they're provided or whatever. So I contacted the ICC and I contacted the guy that interprets all the codes for the ICC and asked him what it means, that code. And he acknowledged to me, and I gave you a email from him, he goes, the punctuation's pretty bad. But he goes, it is grass and weeds. And I even argued with him on the phone. I tried to spin it the other way. I said, I want to be able to cut these volunteer trees that are growing up in the fence lines, in the alleys. And he said, that's not the intent of this code. If you want a code like that, you're going to have to write your code. That's not what we were writing it for. We wrote it for grass and weeds. So that's what he told me. The legal department in 2018 wrote a memo saying that, and then that's where I went with Chuck Kitt when I first came here. He was a legal advisor for the city, or a city prosecutor, and that's what his interpretation was. So that's what we look at right now. It's weeds and grasses. We don't consider volunteer trees and shrubs. We will mow over them if they're in the way of weeds and grass. We're not going to mow around volunteer trees. We'll mow over them, but we don't cite for those. There's times that they've been cited, but they're really not cited for volunteer trees. They're cited because they're damaging the property, like growing up out of the foundation. So that's where we are, and that's the stance we have with that one. And I know that's a point of interpretation and contention, that's why we do what we do in the decision that we made of where we go with it. So those are just a couple pictures. You guys know what weeds and grass look like, but I threw a couple on the PowerPoint. There's your noxious weeds like thistle. Removing vegetation and grass not only eliminates critters like snakes, mice, and wild animals, but it also stops concealment of criminal activities and the element of crime. Bad guys look at properties that aren't maintained, and they look and feel that that's a place of refuge. That's where they can go and they feel safe to commit their crimes. If you don't take care of their property, they know you don't respect your property, they don't respect you. Houses which appear uncared for and broken give the impression that no one cares for it, what happens to the area. So bored and vacant houses attract criminal activity. Tall grass and weeds attract criminal activity, and that's why we want to be on top of it. We try to take a proactive approach as well as a reactive approach to complaints and to alleviate these issues, and we will work with anybody who's willing to work with us. In the spring of 2019, we mailed out this postcard here that I have put up, that I also have in your PowerPoint, to every single violator in 2018, encouraging them to comply with us, so that maybe if we could get the 2018 violators to get on board with the city, we could then cite some more people that we didn't get to in 2018, or at least reduce the amount of properties that were in violation. I am currently having staff pull up the repeat violators from 2019 that were in 2018 to find out if this postcard was effective, because we spent about $800 in sending out postcards. Was it $800 well spent, or was it $800 that people ignore? I don't know. So we're going to look and see how many people didn't repeat, that heeded the postcard and took our advice. In a previous PowerPoints, I gave you a weekly and live summary in the property maintenance inspector. I included in your PowerPoint. We don't need to go through that. And then if TV4 is listening, or I guess I need to hit that video. Yeah. So when we talk about training, education, and things that we get out to the public, every first Tuesday, I work with Habitat and TV4, and we do a video of a different code violation within the city, or a different thing that we enforce. And this is one that we did on weeds, and that we've put out on Facebook, and I believe TV4 will put out come this spring, just to give you an example of some of the education that we're doing.
Why does code enforcement look at how tall your grass is?
The city of Topeka has a ordinance that says that your grass, weeds, or uncultivated vegetation has to be below 12 inches. And it's really important because tall grass is a place that rodents can live and they hide. So you're encouraging rats and stuff up into your property when you don't take care of it. Trash and debris blow into your yard and get captured by the tall grass. And it's also a blight issue, where when people see your yard and you have over 12 inches of grass, it shows that you really don't care for your house or your neighborhood, and it invites crime into the neighborhood. And what happens is our code inspectors go out either proactively and locate these, or we receive complaints from neighbors who are frustrated that their neighbor's grass is over 12 inches. When they go out, they use a stick like this, that's 12 inches in height. They put it in the ground next to the weeds. They document it through photographs, and they take pictures of it. Then they leave this little yellow flag on the property. This is kind of important for citizens, because if you happen to see one of these yellow flags sitting in the yard, then you know that the city has already cited the property. Because we would encourage you to call in any grasses that you see over 12 inches that you don't see the gold flag. We're using this as a perfect example because of how high it is. But when you place the marker down, it's obvious that it's over 12 inches. So we would take our pictures, we would cite the case, a letter would go out to the owner giving them 10 days from the day of the letter. So if we mail it on the 1st, you have till the 10th to mow your property. On the 11th, an inspector goes back out on the property. If he sees that you haven't mowed it, we then contact a crew to come mow the property. If you happen to mow it before the crew gets out there, it's still $106.59 fine for you failing to do it within the first 10 days of doing it. If you don't mow it and our contractors come out and mow it, it can exceed $400. So it's rather expensive to have the city mow for you. So I'd highly recommend that you don't. In 2017, we had over 4,000 mowing cases, or tall grass cases. So this is quite a drain upon our department. If you can imagine, with 8 inspectors going out there and doing 4,000 cases, it takes away from us inspecting the sanitation cases and the housing cases and vehicle cases. Because starting in May, all the way until September, we're going house to house citing for weeds. And the community's participation and help by mowing their lawn and taking care of their property, one, relieves the pressure on us. It makes their property look better cared for and doesn't lower the value of the properties in the neighborhood. Because when you start getting a whole bunch of houses where people aren't mowing, it really does make the whole neighborhood look run down. And it's important you don't just mow the front yard. It's the front yard, the backyards, the sides, the easements, and the alleys, including the easement that is behind some people's house. It's a utility easement where the light poles go. Even if you have a fence that shields that from you, it's your responsibility to take care of half that easement. So these little flags, normally we take the pictures for public access. So we take the pictures from the street or the sidewalk, and we put them right out by the sidewalk. like that, and they'll just be sitting there out by the street. So when you're driving by, if you see those, you know that the city of Topeka has already cited that property. When you're mowing, if you don't bag and you blow your grass, it is against city code to blow your grass out into the street. And that's kind of a big issue. It may not seem like a big deal, but all that grass washes down into the drainage system and can clog it. And then all of a sudden you're gonna have a street that floods and you don't know why, but it's because of all the debris that's been piling up into our sewer system and our drainage. So Water Pollution Control enforces the code for blowing it out into the street. But please don't, because that's just like John talked about. When you're blowing it in the street, you also might blow a rock, a twig, or anything else and hit a vehicle or hit someone riding a bike, and then you've created an injury or damage. So make sure when you're mowing to pay attention how you're blowing your grass and you're blowing it back onto your property.
Oh yeah, those are videos we do monthly on a different topic. So pretty much that's what I have for you today on our weeds.
I think that's good, Mike, what you're doing. I didn't know you guys were doing that for the last year. I'm just one person. I'd like to see us have a catchy title with it and then keep doing it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that people will want to try to figure out what we're talking about and then get educated. Because I think it's great. My neighbor blew his leaves in my yard. I caught him. And I came home and I said, there's a law against that. And he goes, no, they're not. And I'm like, yes, there is. And you have about a half an hour to get all them leaves back in your yard. People don't know that. You know, I said that because they don't know. I see all of these. How can we educate all of these guys that cut grass, that is their job? And guess what they're doing? They're blowing leaves out of the yard, or even grass, you know, in the street, in the gutters. These are commercial businesses. That's important, you know, to me, that we educate them.
And as city employees, and not just code enforcement, because we stop and we talk to people about other things in code, like blowing in the grass is not a code enforcement issue. That is
Okay.
water
Right.
pollution control.
Okay.
We don't enforce it, but we stop and we hold that conversation.
So it's just the leaves then?
No, it's correct. No, so when you're mowing or blowing the leaves out into the street, you're creating a drainage issue. You're also creating danger for motorcycles and bicycles and everything else. But we'll stop and we'll chat with them. Do you realize you could get a fine if you're doing this? You know, some of them, even though a lot of times they tell you they don't know, if you really asked them, they know they shouldn't be blowing it in the street.
Yeah.
You know you shouldn't be taking your wrapper when you're eating a candy bar and throwing it in the street. But I didn't realize I shouldn't, is the answer you get. So we stop, and I would encourage other city employees, when you're seeing minor violations that aren't crimes that the police should be involved in. You know, you shouldn't stop a guy and get out there and yell at him. But as a code enforcement officer, when some guy's stealing a car. But when it comes to this, you stop and you inform them and you educate them, and that's what my inspectors do. And other departments can do that as well. We figure if we can team up and help the other departments, truthfully, it saves on us, because these calls come to us. They don't come to the department they're assigned. You know, so that's what we do.
Okay. Just thinking of ways that we could educate. What about the repeat offenders? How do we look at them? And I know you sent out the card, and I think that's cool. But what I didn't see was like unless it was on the front, any contact information. If you have any questions or concerns, call this person.
That's going to be on the letter that we send them.
Okay. But I mean, you sent out the card. Did that have any contact?
No,
Okay.
it has, I mean, it's a postcard, so on the back it's got the contact information. I can promise you, I got phone calls. People knew how to look up my phone number and tell me what they thought of that card.
Well, I'm just seeing that, so I'm just making
Yeah.
sure. But what about the repeat offenders?
So
What are we doing to help them?
To help them, I mean, you're making a choice when you get notified and you get billed and then you don't do it again. We're billing you. We're mowing it, and the first one, your administrative fee is $100. The second and subsequent ones, it's $200. So it gets more expensive. It goes from $249.65 to $349.65, and the cost is a good deterrent that people, after they get billed,
Oh,
they,
yeah.
I don't want to have this happen again. But there's people that seem to not care. And then they actually pay the bill too, and you're going, would have been a whole lot cheaper to pay somebody $50, you know? So right now we have 228 that received penalty fees that we didn't mow, which means they didn't get it done in time. So it's been reduced, and that's what we're trying to do. We'll work with anybody. If somebody calls us and says, look, I'm in Kansas City, my wife told me that I got this card, I'm not gonna be back until the 12th day, we'll tell them, look, if you're gonna mow it on the 13th day, we won't go out and inspect it until the 14th day. Because they called and they took the time to work with us. That phone number of the inspector is right there. You know, so you have to be proactive on your own property too. It's not, once I send you notice, it is your duty to take care of it or to reach out and find out what the deal is and to say, well, I couldn't get to it or I just didn't know. Yeah, you did.
Okay. And what about, do we have any problems collecting on the fees? Are we doing pretty good on collecting on fees?
So I don't follow our fee collection. It goes straight to accounting. One of the philosophies that I've had with our office is that our goal is voluntary compliance and that we don't want a penny from the city or our city constituents. We'd rather everybody comply voluntarily. So all the monies go straight to accounting. We don't see anything. We don't know what's being collected. I made an inquiry 2 weeks ago and just didn't hear back. And I'm sure it's with the holiday seasons and all the other budget things at the end of the year. Where it was is extremely high. But we send it to collections if they don't. We place it on the property taxes if they don't pay. The collections agency will ultimately sue many of these people who don't pay, so then they get their money. So I can't tell you where we are financially. I was hoping to. I'd made the request, but it just didn't get there.
And then I don't see a letter that you said you were gonna show us.
I sent you, I sent them via email. Yeah, I sent a whole bunch of them.
Okay.
The only thing I didn't give you, and I meant to bring it and I can go grab one, was the door hanger.
Okay.
I think one of you asked for the door hanger, and I said, and I didn't realize that I didn't include it in the email I sent you. But that's no problem. When we're all done, I'll bring you guys what our door hanger is. I know that we can improve our door hanger because it doesn't hang on a door, so we got to duct tape it. And I think we can get a better one out there because I want to use door hangers a little more than we're using them now because they can save us money ultimately. Because if I can drop you a door hanger for your couch on the porch, and say I'm coming back in a week and you remove the couch, then I don't have to send you the certified letter saying it's in violation.
Right.
And when you start adding up all the nickels and dimes that a case costs, if I can just ask you to do it on certain situations, it's a whole lot better.
Yeah. Mr. Padilla, did you?
I only had one question. You kind of touched on it a little bit. For some of the repeat offenders, are any of those people who are not capable of maintaining their property? Would an inspector have been able to identify that situation, and are there resources available to them so that they, I'm not saying so that you can point them in the right direction to get it done?
So we struggle with those resources because people call us and say, we want to step up and we want to be that resource. And then we call those people and they don't want to be that resource because they walk over the house and see the grass is 2 feet high and they go, I don't have my personal mower, I'm not taking on that person's property.
Yeah.
I just had, I wish I could tell you the realty company that said we would like to be your go-to for 2020 on small projects like that. So we are setting something up like that. We probably get 20, 25 of those a year, and it's sad. When you're listening, you can hear it in the voice of the person that they physically can't mow.
Yeah.
And they go, I don't have family, my children live in New York, New Jersey, whatever, and I'm on a fixed income and I can't do that. So we try to find the resources. Every once in a while we can get them hooked up. A church will call randomly and say, hey, we'd like to help. We say, hey, matter of fact, here you go. But we don't have a set base, and that's been a challenge since as long as I can remember. And it's the commitment that the volunteer has to make time and time again. You have to find a volunteer that's willing to say, I'm coming back every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or every week, if you think about it. There's a certain part of the grow season, I'm willing to come and take care of your property once a week for the next 3 months. Then I'm willing to come back every 2 weeks. And that's where it kind of just falls. But we have a real big house out on Southwest 10th. We hooked that lady up with the Boy Scouts. She couldn't take care of it. And she said, well, Boy Scouts looked at her property and said, well, we got this. So we try to find the resources, but it's not easy.
Okay. Well, I ask that so that people understand that you do make that effort and that it's not a cut and dry kind of thing, that you try and work them through it so that there's at least an effort to try and find something. And if there are people out there who think they want to take on that responsibility, which is a commitment, like you said, especially during a heavy growing season, I know for myself, it seems like that's all I do is spend time out on my tractor. So I'm glad that you guys make the effort, though. Thank you.
And the tough part too is coordinating that.
Yeah.
And have we, this might be a good opportunity to reach out to Jump because they're really involved with everything else. Have we thought about that?
When we were in discussions with Jump referencing fair housing, kind of threw that suggestion, if you have a lot of people, would you like to volunteer for some of this? Did not put it out as a formal invitation. So I will not, Jump did not decline my invitation, but it also kind of wasn't heard. But they were also on a mission at that time for fair housing. So I don't know. That might be somebody that might want to step up.
To me, when you look at all the people that are involved in Jump and all the different churches, again, you have a lot of people that are good people that want projects. They just don't know how to get there.
You definitely have that problem of the volunteer coordination and keeping it running. And that's one of the biggest struggles. That's for all of the issues that we have within this city and the people that need more than just help for code enforcement, because there's all sorts of things we can help people with.
And maybe I will check. What we did at work was through foster care, and we set up a kind of like a base, and we went to all the churches and we called it Project whatever. I can't think of the name of it. But anytime somebody came into foster care home, what we would do is send out an email and say, we have 2 kids that need 2 twin beds. So it really didn't cost anybody anything. It was just a matter of them churches saying, yes, I will participate in this program. The email went out, and so then they would send that out to their congregation, and people were just flooding with stuff. And so then they'd send an email back and say, I found it. And then we would go get it and provide it to the foster care homes. Maybe if we could do something like that, that would be great, to get churches to say, yes, I will, and buy into it. And that's how, anytime that we needed anything, that's how we did it.
And I think that's a really good idea. It's very difficult who's going to run that, manage it, who's going to vet the people. I'm not exactly comfortable taking a phone call from a guy that says his name's Chuck and he would like to go mow people's lawns and then send him over to a vulnerable person and then find out that Chuck wasn't that nice of a guy. And so that's what I'd worry about. You have to do some vetting. It's something that's needed, but it's something that's very serious, and it's going to be very time consuming for somebody to actually manage it properly and to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing.
Yeah.
Sorry to all the Chucks out there, I just threw a name.
Well, and some of that we just got to get past too. I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Karen?
Lots of things, of course. Don't know where to start. I do want to say that, and I just loaned Sylvia my collection of letters. I really like them, and I sense your pen in them as much as whoever that consultant was. I think they're really, really improved over what they used to be. One question regarding them would be, you said, I think, today in the weeds presentation and last time in sanitation, that you are not taking those 2 sectors, you're not sending them over for criminal prosecution as a ruling.
Sanitation, grass, graffiti, and vehicles do not go over. The only thing that goes over is housing.
Well, you have it in the letters.
They could be, yes.
It says that they could be, and so I just wanted to double check.
Right.
Okay.
And I believe that needs to be in there. This is going to go back from before my time, because I asked when I was an inspector, why is this in here? And what I was told is that it has to be in there. It's a very serious thing, and this is what people could be in trouble for, ultimately.
And
So,
I understand that. Obviously, for just a sanitation or a weeds thing, if it's already over $200, that's significant. Are you never ever sending them, or are there some where you would consider?
We haven't. We've held the conversation. The sad part, the conversations we hold end up being for LLCs that are defunct or something where we really can't.
So what?
Yeah, we can't put a finger on who to prosecute.
Gotcha.
So can we? I believe we can. I mean, that's where we have to work it out with the city prosecutor. It's just not the normal practice, but I could see that if it got to a point where the person's just putting their nose up going, do it, I don't care, you're taking my house anyway in 2 years.
Now, I understand.
Yeah.
I just wanted to double check.
Yes.
I thought I had it figured out. We were talking about the referral list. You might want to send, I think your referral list is really good. And when you're sending more stuff out to the committee, you might want to, or maybe at the next meeting, you may print those off a variety of things that don't lend themselves to being one attachment. But the handouts that you give people for the resource services,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Two questions from the presentation. When you do the notification, does that also go to the resident at the address if the owner's address is different from the
No.
property?
No,
Okay, so you just are sending one,
yes.
and that seems to be,
It's the owner's
Sufficient.
responsibility.
Understood.
So that's why it's to the owner. I understand that a landlord tells the tenant, it's your responsibility. That's not what we're getting into. It's ultimately the owner's. The owner can work that out with his tenant. If his tenant fails to mow the lawn, then he can deal with his tenant. But we notify the owner because that's the person we have to legally notify.
well, I knew you had to notify them. I just wondered if you were doing dual notification on houses. Okay. Well, actually, you're looking now to see if you talked about the number of cases. And so you're still kind of studying whether your frequency of repeats especially is going down.
Yeah, well, we're going to look to see how many repeats we got that relate to that postcard, see if it was worth sending. And then we do have to, we got to take a look at the ones that we've mowed 5 times. You know, why are we mowing that 5 times? Usually we find out that it's nobody owns the property. You know, the person's dead. And it sooner or later will go to taxes unless the Shawnee County appraiser and that they don't want to put it on the tax.
Well, we'll
Then,
deal with that.
yeah.
Under your fees, you said county contract fee, the $25 minimum charge. So you charge at least 50 on every property?
At least 25.
Okay.
So it's $50 an hour.
And
but
that-
they usually spend 15, 20, 30 minutes on a property. So they charge a flat rate of 30 minutes, even if they're there for 10.
And that's because are we using inmates or are we
Yes.
using our own
No,
crews also?
we're using inmates. We
Okay.
don't have equipment.
Okay, just checking, because I remember when we first set the administrative fees and penalties, we looked at the fact that the state wouldn't let us charge more than the actual cost. At that point, we were using contractors, and I don't think any of them were less than $40. So, I mean, $25 is a pretty good deal. But do you think that county rate is just defensible? Is that why it got picked?
I can't tell you why that number got picked. That was
Okay.
before my time.
Okay. Well, it might be something, I know we'd have to defend it for state law
Then I'll go-
purposes.
Yeah, would I go back $50 an hour, and when you take a jailer's pay and their benefits and stuff comes out to close to $50 an hour. That's going to be my guess to you of why we have it at that price.
Okay. I mean, one of the reasons we added the administrative fees and penalties now, some years ago, was because just charging people, the staff at the time thought they couldn't charge for their own time. And it was like, oh, no, yes, we can. And,
Right.
and we got that interpretation. But the issue was that the actual negotiated, really cheap mowing fee that we were paying to the contractor was so low, people looked at it and said, well, that's a pretty good deal. Why should I
Right.
mow it?
Yeah, if you're going to bill me $25 to mow my property, I might just let you mow my property.
Exactly, that's
Right.
what was happening. So the idea of adding those fees was that it would be less appealing.
Correct.
So just checking on that. Yeah, I was looking back at the minutes and the notes. So you're still waiting because you were going to try and get the county and the city and the collection agency to give you 2017.
Yeah, the county came back and said, I don't know why you really want us to give you any money because we really don't collect money from you, and they don't. So it's going to be the collections agency and what they pay the city. So,
Well, the
It-
county
but
would
it-
have to go back and figure out.
yeah, and it's the
split it out.
taxes and how they split the taxes of what taxes they collected and what
So
they
they
paid
kind of
us.
said no.
Yeah, they were polite about it.
Does the city get an itemized transmittal when that money comes across, or is it just a lump sum that's not?
I can't speak for what accounting does.
Okay.
No.
It's not, okay. Because it really would be good to know what sort of return we're getting on all that expense. Related to that, and again, I know we're making good progress. Has there been any effort internally in the department or otherwise that you know of to kind of back up from all that and look at whether there are some overall strategies we could either copy from somebody else or cook up that would improve, that would simply reduce the numbers of inspections? We all knew that we were in such bad shape, it was going to take years to get on top of it. But are there any strategies?
We've adapted and changed constantly because of
Yeah.
that. In our conversations that we have, we do go to training, when we go to conferences and we sit and listen to what other departments can do. I can tell you in the state of Kansas, you'd be very proud of the city of Topeka's code enforcement unit, property maintenance unit, and what we do as we're the ones being reached out of what we're doing. But we've went to national conferences and I've brought 3 or 4 things back and implemented them within our department that we've picked up from them. So that is a constant, that we always want to improve what we're doing, and we want to find ways to, if we could find a way just to get everybody to comply, we're looking at ways to comply. I got a couple other plans that I just don't want to put out there if they're going to not take off or if no one's interested, including involving the neighborhood associations at addressing their own
Yeah,
neighborhoods.
You sent them, at least to me, I think it went out to everybody, one idea that you'd had. Are you really, in terms of writing up the vegetation, how long have you been writing up? Your list was front, back, fence rows, alleys, and easements. I think I forgot one.
2016 or 2017.
Okay.
So I can tell you that, so when I became director and I started getting the phone calls from the people and they go, hey man, you didn't tell me I got to mow my backyard. And so then I'd look at the thing and I go, oh no, the state law and the city code says you got to mow your backyard. Yeah, but you didn't tell me in your code. When you sent the letter, you said, please mow your yard. And I go, yeah, this is BS, but
You would say, wah, wah.
yeah, no, but they were playing within the system of what the expectation
Gotcha.
was. When a guy's mowed his front yard for 9 years and passed inspection, and in the 10th year, my inspector goes and mows his backyard and bills him, we've changed the rules of that game on him. So we need to be very clear of what the rules are. So it was 2016 or 2017, I insisted that we fine-tune that too, because then somebody comes to a hearing and they point out what we said and how technically it's not the right thing, and then the hearing officer goes, you know, this is what I would prefer to see. And we go, okay, we will then make the change to satisfy prosecution or the hearing officer, because ultimately those are the ones that, they're the ones that have to hear the case. So what they want to see in the case is what we're going to produce out there, and so that's where we got it. But 2016, I'd say, but I know for sure 2017.
Okay, because it, obviously just driving by, you can't be sure. If I may continue, you know that I live with these cases all the time. One of the blocks, and you and I had some correspondence about it, was the second 1200 block of Lincoln, where I got an anguished call from a woman who actually had been written up by the utilities about cleaning out her sewer line, but her panic was that the neighbor's tree roots were probably what was causing this problem and what could we do. In the course of that conversation, you know, we got that worked, I eventually got that worked out for her. I assume you knew that, but in the course of it though, I drove the block and it was terrible. It was overgrown, front yards, backyards. Many people did have fences. There were trees growing up in the fences, but also really high vegetation. You said at one point that, oh yeah, we've addressed that before. In your letter to me, you said that that block itself had had 112 cases just since you'd been managing the unit. That's an incredible number of repeats. You said, we'll address it, and I went by, it was a couple weeks later, I think. I had taken pictures of the front and backyards of that block and the block that faced it across the street, as well as the block south, because there was just vegetation everywhere. We can talk about trees later, but just tall vegetation. And it was, even the stuff across the street that was growing up around the guy wires and so on was gone. I mean, the alley had been cleaned up and so on. I asked you some questions about what we were paying other departments because I didn't know, for one thing, whether we were writing up all those things. I know that sometimes you've said to me, I think it's you, well, we'll get hold of forestry and see if they'll go, particularly when it's an alley. So all these things I'm just trying to sort out. In the case of that second 1200 block of Lincoln, had all of those properties, the best you can remember, been written up and just nobody had cleaned up, or did we go and do a gratis cleanup because Councilwoman Hiller had a fit about the block?
Okay, so when it comes to our portion of it, so the weeds and the grass, this was August, I think. Yeah, probably. So we were running.
Our correspondence was in October by the time we were.
Yeah, we were running
up.
200 cases behind.
Okay.
So anything that we cited at that time was taking 45 days or even more to even get to, so you don't see a result. When it came to the alleys and stuff, we notify forestry, and I found out, so if we incorporate forestry into our cases, or street department into our cases, they actually do send us their time and their money and their bill, and we bill. But if we tell forestry of a problem that's forestry's problem and not ours, we don't involve ourselves anymore because it's forestry's, and I can't answer you if they bill them or if they just go take care of it.
But an overgrown alley, and I've had these in the years before, an overgrown alley, by what you're describing, at least since 2016, wouldn't be forestry's job because it should have been written up, right?
No, it would be forestry's job because those are trees and bushes that are growing out into the alley.
What you'd said to me about that one, and we can look at my pictures and stuff, it was growth. It was tall by the time I got there, but it was fresh growth, and you told me it had already been cleared earlier that summer, maybe the season before.
Without seeing the pictures you're talking about, or what,
Okay.
I can't answer you. But and when it gets overgrowth in the alley, those are trees and shrubs that are growing. It's not weeds and grass. And if they grow to where they're impinging on traffic in that alley, that will fall under forestry.
Well, we'll get back to it. We on the council get reamed out because, at about that same time, I went to the Potwin annual meeting. And as it turned out, got myself in big trouble because a lady raised her hand in the meeting and she was really mad that the city had not cleared the alley behind the chain link fence. It wasn't a solid fence, next door to her. And so I said in the meeting, well, it's not the city's responsibility to clean the alley, it's the property owners. And so she was insulted that I had said that. She was angry and she brought it up because the city hadn't got out there to do it. Turned out that the city had cleared it 4 years in a row. And so she had an assumption that it was the city's responsibility, not the property owners. And I'm just hanging out, chewed up.
Well, your statement was correct. It is the property owner's responsibility.
Wow.
But when they don't take care of it, the person that has to take action for that violation is forestry. And they were clearing. When it comes to the trees and the bushes that are growing up in the alley, forestry would be who the code falls under. And that's the ones that are clearing those alleys. We don't have the equipment to clear those alleys.
So the Public Works Director is in charge of the transportation system. Alleys are a part of the transportation system. So they have the authority to direct people that their growth is preventing.
Sasha, can you come to the mic, baby? Thank you. Because we want to make sure we hear, or you can even come to one of these mics. We just want to make sure that you're heard. You can come over here if you want to, too. I think one of those are on. It doesn't matter.
They're all on.
Sorry. Thank
So the alleys are part of the transportation system, and the Public Works Director is who is responsible for and manages the transportation system. We don't have the authority under our code to address that. That's why it gets sent to Public Works, and Forestry is their division that manages that kind of an issue.
But Mike's explanation to us earlier before you came and on the slides was that you do write up what is between what is on the alley and in an easement and advise the owners that is their responsibility.
Because if it's vegetation, then we can, but when it starts to impede traffic and vehicles can't get through, then it becomes a Public Works issue because it's the transportation system. Yes.
And also, what we're citing for is grasses and weeds that are in that alley. Not the bushes, not the trees.
Okay.
So when we tell them you need to mow your grass, that's what we're telling them, your grasses and your weeds. We would be overstepping our bounds to tell them to cut your volunteer trees, to cut your shrubbery. We don't have the statutory authority within our unit to do that, and that doesn't become an issue until it impedes traffic, and that's when, as Sasha explained, the transportation department gets involved, which they refer it to Forestry, who then cuts it back so the trash trucks and me and you can drive that alley.
And I think, if I may, Karen, I think another problem is, because I have this issue with a lot of my constituents, is we need to be very clear today where we're at on easements, you know. It was the city's responsibility, then it was, or the citizens, and then the city came along, they did it, and now they believe it's our responsibility. It's gotten back to us, and I'm like, no, it's your responsibility. And nothing to do with you, I'm just saying, over the years, we've bounced back, you know, so many times. You know, I have a guy on Golden, and I have to go by and tell him, this is your responsibility. He's like, no, it's the city's. Because they'll come out and do it. And that's what I'm saying. It's bounced back and forth so many times. We just need to make it very, very clear. And how do we do that? I'm just saying.
I don't have an answer for you
Yeah.
on that. I know that, go ahead.
Larry just looked it up. So it is in the code that it's Forestry's responsibility. It's, well,
You want to read it, Mary?
Yeah, in the Topeka Municipal Code, it's the duty of the private property owner abutting the alley, so you are correct, to remove vegetation, including trees, bushes, weeds, located in the alley where vegetation impedes travel. So you're correct.
And could you give me the number since you have it open?
Yes, it's TMC 12.65.080, but Forestry sends out the notice and tells them you got to clean this up. And if they don't do it, then there are a notice to abate goes out, and
Well, see, we've got some
Yeah.
duplication here, and I think this is something, you know, one of the reasons to review this is to then perhaps look at how, again, that's why I asked about preventing this. If there's confusion and we're lobbing the ball back and forth between code and Forestry, fundamentally it's the owner's responsibility. They can't tell because of the inconsistent way that it's addressed, and if their neighbors aren't going to take care of theirs, then the person who just got the notice from somebody isn't going to do theirs either. And so, okay.
You good with it, Mary? I see you still reading.
no, I'm just reading through other.
I appreciate that. I think everybody knows my position on the shrubs and trees. When I called the IPMC in 2014 to confirm, because we were trying to decide whether to change that language, the punctuation isn't in the wrong place. That guy said it means trees and shrubs provided. And so the solution that it appeared we had then was that you simply wrote up anything that looked like it was a volunteer, and then people could use the 10-day appeal period to say, oh, no, that's a ginkgo tree that my grandmother planted, and it might not look good, but we want to keep it, and that kind of be on them to say if it was provided or intentional, as a garden would be, and otherwise, same thing when the people decide to plant their whole front yard and creeping something or other instead of grass, they have to say, no, that's intentional, that's what we want. If we're not clear on that, I would suggest we need to change the language. At the same time, you know, it strikes me, and this gets back to my earlier question about maybe some sort of preventive initiative that raises the bar on what people expect. If the code had been applied steadily and timely over the years before you all inherited it, we wouldn't have trees and shrubs. They can get pretty big in one season, but for the most part, a timely notice for that property owner that it's their responsibility and that they should mow or otherwise cut down whatever's growing there would have prevented the trees and shrubs in the first place, ideally. And we certainly are at a point where if we could do an initiative to, this is again my speculation list of ideas, to get everything looking good, then it might be easier to maintain at a higher level. So that, for instance, if we went ahead, I understand you guys going, ugh, if we added that, look what we'd be taking on. But we can't make these decisions based on abatement. We just can't. And if the purpose of the code is health and safety, there are many, many things in that code that, fixing your fence, some of the examples in the letters that aren't critical to life and health and safety, we have defined that more broadly using that standard property maintenance code to say we don't use blight as often as the code before it was there included, but I mean it's all part of that. We don't even have to do a study to correlate crime and safety issues to overgrowth on blocks or on houses. We know that it attracts people to break into houses, that the blocks that are overgrown have more crime and so on, or our property values are affected. And so some thoughts on that, but I think we need to not be afraid to put it in, knowing that if we can come up with a corresponding strategy to engage the entire community, not just the junk folks and the people that need to do their own yards at first. I think it's a big challenge, but worthwhile, because when we do surveys of citizens, I collected a couple of them, but what comes out on top every time is that people want our city to look good. And the overgrowth, particularly those trees and shrubs, I've always included the fence rows when I talk about it, but you say you're actually writing up the fence rows now and requiring people to get them cleaned out?
From grass and weeds.
Grass and weeds, just not the grapevines and the trees that have grown.
And if they don't do it, we take everything down. Because we're not going to get to one weed, stop and go around a volunteer tree and get to the next weed.
Right.
That volunteer tree will come with it.
Which is good. They're hard
Right.
to get out if you let them
Yes.
go. But again, the timeliness of getting those write-ups, once we get past this kind of forest that we have out here, as you guys have made so much progress, we should be able to stay on top of it. When we first passed the IPMC, it was an issue then. We talked about how to do maybe a 3-year initiative. It didn't pan out at the time. Again, people were pretty overwhelmed with all that we had to take on. But for instance, a strategy that said, we're going to take 3 years. And the first year, everybody's getting cleaned up from the curb to the sidewalk. Everybody. Or from the curb to the front of the house, front of the property. And then the second year, all the side yards and fence rows. And the third year, all the backyards and any alley or easements. And it wouldn't have to be in that order. But to then work out a strategy, Keep America Beautiful was interested at the time. It would be a big challenge, but that might be a way to stage it. And maybe we'd have to stage it over 5 years instead of 3 or something like that. But what we found, I find it in volunteering as well, is that a lot of people don't really want to be on a board. That's not their thing, or on a committee, or go to neighborhood meetings. But getting out and actually doing something is satisfying. You guys have done a great job with handing out the handouts for maintenance. There's part of that initiative could be, JAAA does mowing for seniors and persons with disabilities too, or has a volunteer cool that they do, would be to, as you all have, keep an eye on, okay, how do we help not only get all the properties up, but give somebody a plan for how they're going to maintain depending on their particular circumstances, so that we can have the city look like what our standards really are. I noted back when we talked about the neglected or vacant structures ordinance that it talked about overgrowth as well. And often what has upset people about those properties is that they're overgrown and the trees and shrubs grow up around them, and then they invite people to break in. I mean, it's the security and so on. So I think it all goes together. I want to suggest to the committee that if we have conflicting views and we just need to do other language, fine, but that we do correspondingly, we realize and acknowledge what that means, and that we see if we can't challenge ourselves, or my staff's been pretty creative about things, and others, to come up with an initiative so we get it where we want it. So, end of speech on that one. I have a question about speaking again of the tall weeds, some of which turns into trees and shrubs and some didn't. Downtown looked terrible all summer. I have pictures as well. Like the vacant lot across from the post office, all the weeds had grown up in the cracks. They were this tall all the way around it all summer. And then, this is just a for instance, the businesses that face on Jackson, totally overgrown. And because that's a vacant parking lot on the corner, I mean, even from Kansas Avenue, you see this totally overgrown stuff. Why would they? My guess is that none of them were ever written up just because nothing changed all summer. And there are different owners involved. How would, I didn't call you, I just kind of watched to see what would happen in the course of the summer. How would, with your system right now, how would anything get overlooked?
Because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I mean, the inspector that has that area was running 80 cases logged every day that he's got to follow up on. So it takes away from the proactive approach, because if you don't call me, which I beg of anybody to call me when they see a violation, they're going to be reactive to the caseload they have.
Well, and he works really well
Yes.
with the neighborhood
He does.
that are there. I know that.
I don't have a problem with his productivity. He's a hard worker, and he's going call to call that we had to go. And I think Sylvia asked about, do we help people? We went over there and helped him a couple times trying to get caught up.
Right.
Because he has North Topeka and Ward Mead and a piece of downtown, and then and there's challenges there, and it's never ending. And so that's why, I mean, it gets to a point where you're reactive and you're chasing your calls. When you build a caseload of your housing cases and all this, and you're required to do all those follow-ups, you're occupied to where your strategic enforcement, because all of them are challenged with picking like a corner of their area and working its way through it and doing, like you're saying, house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood. When we're in those heat months of May through September, October, they are literally in that car moving nonstop, trying to just keep up.
At one point, and it was maybe 5 years ago now, you guys as administrative procedures aren't always shared, it's periodic, but at that time, their protocol was that they were supposed to drive their entire district over the course of every 30 days. Is that still the case?
I would expect that every time they can. They work their area. I don't have it where I track them and say, did you drive down Tyler Street? But that is part of their training when they're out there, that they need to check it all. There's some streets you forget you have because there's just no problem on that street, and it's a weird street, and you turn the corner and you go, oh, wow. So,
Understood.
yeah, is there a requirement to drive every single street 30 days? No, there's not a requirement.
And
But is it something I'd expect? Yeah.
Okay, just checking. I mean, downtown, pretty much, when you think of downtown, it's fronts and they don't even have any grass or any dirt. But those really have been out of hand.
And as soon as you were telling me about the ones like at the post office, I can remember seeing it.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And are they expected to write up We got some pictures even from Ward Mead. I think the day that I took those, I just headed home down 4th Street and just the guy wires and just the stuff that,
You were getting tough there because if that's not private property, that doesn't fit within our code.
what do you mean? People are responsible for the easement.
Well, you have to tell me where that guide wire is. And when
Oh,
you're talking
on
about
the street,
on
between the
downtown,
sidewalk
yeah.
and the.
Okay, I'm following.
and the
So
street.
you're saying 4th Street, just pick a street.
Exactly.
Okay.
And 12th Street was the same. I mean, years ago, when, maybe even before we passed the IPMC, I mean, it's always been that 10 or 12 inch height on the grasses, but you could drive down 12th Street from Gage and about choke. I mean, if you were looking at just what was growing over the curbs and up the guy wires and so on, it's a little better now. But 4th Street was where I was that day, and sure enough, just easy to fix.
And if that's the only thing going and they are working call to call and we're running 200 cases behind, they may not get cited.
Just checking. Again, I'm aware, it seems that if we want to really improve the city, and that's not just reactive enforcement, but something proactive where we get it looking like what our code says it ought to look like, so people have a better idea what the standard really is, maybe that would help, reduce the recidivism and the amount of work. You guys have brought it so far, and the inspectors to the person, as I said before, just work their tails off and agree.
One of the things we
So-
focused on in 2017 and 18 was housing stock and siding houses, which in return turns into long cases.
Yeah.
And because of those long cases, creates an extensive backlog of activities that you got to go revisit the house, get it set up for court, and everything that you have to do on those, which then, so as opposed to a weed case, I go side it, we tell the contractor to go mow it, I can move to the next one. So when we focused on that, we actually created a lot of work for the inspectors, but housing stock was what we focused on and I found very important.
It's important. No question about that. Okay, I might have a couple more, but I'll pass the
Mike?
baton back.
No, thank you.
You don't have any questions?
Nope.
Okay. How much more do you have, Karen? I too think we've come a long way. My biggest thing is I just think we've got to educate everybody.
And we're trying to find better ways to do it. We attend over 100 community meetings a year.
Yeah.
We're doing not just the one the video you watched, but I sat down with TV4 to do educational things that they'd put on Channel 4. We just haven't got them out there yet. If something happens, like a code changes or a state law changes,
Right,
or,
right.
or I shave my beard and then I mess it up because we got to
Right.
redo the whole darn thing because they didn't want to see me with a beard 1 minute and then the next I'm gone. So we're still working on those. And plus, we got numbered on the letters that said, please call us. I expect every single inspector to return the phone calls. I don't hear what I heard when I first came in of the inspectors not calling me back. Said, you are going to work with them. We didn't go out and do follow-up inspections if somebody called and said, I don't understand. We do. If you call us and go, I don't get it, what do you want? We walk out there and we point that as a soffit.
Right.
This is what we need.
Right.
So those are things that we've changed, and those add up to time. So these inspectors are doing things that they didn't do before, and they're busy 8 hours a day, shy of maybe January and February. Those are kind of good months for us when it
And
comes to treating.
I would say our inspectors are doing a better job of that, of returning calls in a timely manner. And, because I just remember our voicemails and our email return. I mean, those are just little,
That's customer service.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's customer service and that's basic and it wasn't being done. And, I go to several NIA meetings and I see Megan out there, call me, here's my number, call me, no, what do you need? Or, talking about and I just see that interaction and I think that's good, but I just think we need to educate people. I talked to Sasha about, did you know, so we could put something in our newsletter. We just got to figure it out to get the word out to them so they will know. That's what I see.
And we're coming
Yeah.
up with every way that we can come up with, and we'll add to it. You know,
Yeah.
we go, hey, this is going to be a good idea. Let's do it. You know,
Yeah.
the landlord expo. You know, we made sure to be there. We go to the Safe Streets landlord. I don't know. They do a presentation to teach landlords
housing.
safe housing. We go to that. We even went to Schmucker's employee health fair, and we set up there to talk about code enforcement. I will not turn down a news agency that calls and says, I want an interview, because that's education, because I know we're doing a good job, and I'm thrilled to tell them what we're doing. So anything that I can come up with to educate the community and to help them understand what we do, because they don't know exactly what we do, but they don't like it. I mean, I don't like getting a letter, you know, so I understand. So I'm more than happy to come up with any solutions we can, and we continually try to come up with better ones.
Karen?
I think, I think I'm good for today. What I'm
Okay.
trying to do, because we're going to keep on working through these different subject matters, is for us to kind of go through them and start to see, if there are things that should change. That tends to sift out to be very few things, and so it's good.
Okay, good discussion on weeds, and we'll kind of keep brainstorming unless, Sasha, you have anything to add? Mary, you have anything else? City manager? Okay. Any other items in committee? I don't think so.
I think not for today, but I guess we need to figure out whether we're still going to go through the rest of the tabs in the handbook, and whether we're going to try and have this committee meet in January, or whether this whole task will go forward to next year's committee in February.
What's the rest of the tabs? What else? do you-
Well, we were to do a session on each of the tabs, so inoperable vehicles, and then graffiti was already kind of included before, you said. Housing cases. So we've got some more of the subject matter to go through.
We don't
I
really-
went ahead and, based on what my understanding was, just set up my questions based on the tabs to just roll up.
I'm gonna say we'll probably roll them over. I don't know how much time we have. Because I would like to do housing next. I think that would be our next key, housing.
Well, yeah, it's fine.
What did you have?
At one point, we were going to go in order in the book, which
Oh,
would put
okay.
inoperable vehicles. the
Okay,
next,
we can do
and then
inoperable
housing after
vehicles, that's
that.
fine. We can do that next. We'll look at a calendar to see, Karen. Let's look at a calendar to see.
I think we were meeting on the third Monday before. What was our routine? I think the third Monday would be Martin Luther King birthday, so there would be a conflict immediately on what our regular date would have been.
Okay, we'll see what happens.
Just, vehicles going to be fast. You've already heard everything that leads up to everything except for towing the car. From that on is the only thing that we haven't talked about. So, just so you know, that's
What's
going to
after
be brief.
vehicles? Vehicles is what?
After vehicles, we get then graffiti, unless somebody had more. Mike mentioned last time when we did sanitation. So after that, we get into housing.
Let's plan on vehicles, graffiti, and housing. We'll see what we get,
I think that's awesome. All right.
okay? All righty, thank you. Anything else? If not, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.